You are worth $41.2 million. And the barista who makes your coffee every morning thinks you do boring spreadsheet work for a logistics company. You told her that once, 11 months ago, half paying attention, and she's never asked twice. You've had this exact conversation, in one form or another, with a hairdresser, a landlord, and a man you went on 2 dates with last spring. You never correct any of them. That's not an accident. That's the entire architecture. It starts with $94,000 and a folder you almost didn't open. You are 28, sitting across from a man named Ostrovsky who has run a regional laundry service business for 22 years and wants out quietly. No broker, no auction. He slides the numbers across the table and says the sentence that becomes the first rule of your life. You want this in your name, or you want it to not exist at all. You choose the second option before you fully understand what it costs. An LLC filed in Wyoming, $125 to set up. A registered agent who will never once hear your voice in the next 9 years. You also do something Ostrovsky's own lawyer never suggests. You open a second, unrelated entity the same week. A thin consulting shell that does almost nothing except issue you a small, boring W-2 salary. It's your Decoy career. If anyone ever pulls a background check, a lease application, a nosy relative's Google search, this is what surfaces. A modest income, a normal job title, nothing worth a second look. By 31, the laundry business has become 6. 6 businesses tucked into 3 separate LLCs because a lawyer named Reyes tells you never to let a lawsuit against one touch the others. You believe her the day it's tested. A slip-and-fall claim for $310,000 lands on exactly one entity and stops there, like it hit a wall that was built for this exact moment. Reyes bills you $290 an hour and is worth every cent of it, though you don't understand why until the claim never touches your house, your car, or a single one of the other 5 businesses. You start carrying something the videos in this niche never mention: visible debt. A standard 30-year mortgage on an unremarkable $380,000 house. A financed Honda with a normal interest rate, paid down at the exact pace a normal person would pay it. Not because you need the loans, the holding company could clear both in a single wire, but because a credit report with 0 debt is the single strangest, most flaggable thing a quietly wealthy person can have. A landlord runs your credit before approving a rental for a friend's daughter, sees a mortgage, a car loan, and a modest limit on one credit card, and never thinks twice. Looking average is a strategy, not an accident. By 35, you're running 8 companies through one holding structure, and the friction stops being legal and starts being physical. You keep a $60 phone for the checking account with $6,100 in it, the one you actually use at gas stations and grocery stores, the one your friends have the number for. The real portal, the one that touches $210 million across 4 banking relationships, lives on a second device in a locked drawer, one you've never once opened in public, not at a coffee shop, not on a plane, not at your own kitchen table if anyone eats home. You've rehearsed, without meaning to, a small habit of angling any screen away from a room the second Sons walks in behind you. One wrong login on the wrong screen is the only real threat left to the whole design, and you know it. Then comes the morning that across you walk into the lobby of a commercial building your holding company bought 11 months earlier, a building you've never visited to check on a leaking roof a manager mentioned in an email. A mid-level property manager named Castillo, 26 years old and doing his job exactly right, tells you to leave. Assumes you're tenant trying to sneak into a software elevator. You almost tell him who you are. You don't. You call his supervisor instead, quietly, from the parking lot, and the next morning Castillo gets promoted, never learning why, never learning that the broke-looking woman he escorted out owns the blood, his paycheck, and the poorest facing guarding. By 39, the number crosses $260 million, and your sister Renata calls you on a Tuesday town, careful, rehearsed, telling you her son needs a surgery that isn't covered, $184,000 out of pocket. You could wire it before the call ends. It wouldn't register on your balance sheet as a decision. It's roughly what one of your smaller companies clears in 6 weeks. But a wire like that has a name on it, and a name is a thread, and thirst get pulled at family dinners, at Thanksgiving, in the exact rooms you can never fully leave. So instead, you make 3 calls the next morning to a proxy attorney who sets up something that looks, on paper, like a small regional medical hardship grant, the kind local non-profits give out every year, funded quietly through a foundation nobody will ever trace back past its second layer. 3 weeks later, Renata calls you, crying, thrilled, telling you her family won something, that someone out there is finally looking out for people like them. You tell her that's wonderful news. You never correct that word either. You sit with the phone in your hand afterward for a long time, feeling less like a benefactor and more like someone who just lied to the one person she loves most, for her own good, and isn't entirely sure the distinction matters. Dating, at this level, becomes its own kind of architecture. You sit across from a man a friend set you up with at a coffee shop that charges $14 for 2 lattes, and he insists on splitting the bill down to the cent, genuinely unaware he is negotiating over $7 with someone who could buy the building the coffee shop sits inside. He asks what you do. You give him the Decoy answer, the boring one, the one you've given 100 times, and he nods, satisfied, moving on to a story about his own job instead. You like him. That's the part nobody warns you about. The loneliness isn't in being unable to trust people, it's in liking someone and knowing you'll never let the real number exist between you, because the real number changes every single thing a person asks you for, expects from you, forgives you for. There is no version of a second date where you explain a perpetual trust in Delaware without also explaining why you've never once mentioned it. And that second conversation is one you've never been brave enough to have with anyone. By 44, you've hired a reputation firm through a blind trust, paid $1,400 a month, whose only job is scrubbing old addresses, old tagged photos, old associations off the internet before anyone thinks to look. An old college roommate's wedding photo, a tagged location from a coffee shop 3 years ago, a forum post from your 20s with your full name still attached. All of it disappears, quietly, on a schedule, the way a gutter gets cleaned before anyone notices it was ever clogged. You've become, deliberately, a difficult person to Google. Somewhere in a filing cabinet sits a perpetual trust structure that will keep managing all 22 companies long after you're gone. No heir named, no family member ever seeing a single dollar directly, the machine simply continuing to run, quietly, collecting rent and licensing fees and management income, the way it was built to. You drafted it this way on purpose, and there are nights you're not entirely sure that was mercy or just another wall. That thought used to feel cold. Now it feels like the only honest ending this kind of structure was ever going to have. The paranoia never fully leaves, even at $500 million. At a neighborhood barbecue, someone asks casually what you think about interest rates, and you have to catch yourself mid-sentence before the words mezzanine debt or cap rate slip out of a mouth that's supposed to belong to someone who does boring spreadsheet work. One wrong phrase at a barbecue is worth more than any lawsuit. A lawsuit needs evidence. A neighbour's memory needs nothing at all. And still, the actual cost of all of it doesn't show up where you expected. It shows up the day you're sitting in a plastic chair at the DMV for 3 hours, license renewal, because appearing to need to renew your own license in person is part of staying invisible. You have the money to charter anything, skip any line, buy the building the DMV is inside of. You sit in economy seat 34B on a delayed flight 2 weeks later for the same reason. The power was never the ability to disappear. The power was learning to sit still inside an ordinary life you could have exited at any moment, and choosing, every single day, not to. You think, sometimes, about Ostrovsky, the man who handed you the first folder 16 years ago. He never learned what any of this became. He just wanted his laundry business to keep existing after his name came off the door. And it did. Quietly, invisibly, exactly the way everything else you've built has learned to exist. On paper, in every way that matters to a stranger with a search bar, you barely exist at all. That was never the accident. That was always the entire point.